Captain Kim Ji-won pressed his weathered palms against the cold metal railing of the bridge, staring out at the magnificent sight before him. Kepler Station stretched across the void like a glittering city made of steel and light. Dozens of alien spacecraft moved around it like elegant dancers, their hulls catching starlight and throwing it back in brilliant flashes. A massive Vorthan battle cruiser glided past, its surface so polished that Ji-won could see his own ship reflected in it. The alien vessel was beautiful in a way that made humans feel small and primitive. Its curves flowed like liquid mercury, and strange symbols pulsed along its sides in colors that human eyes could barely process. Next to it, a Zephyrian frigate looked like it had been carved from a single enormous crystal, transparent walls revealing the graceful, tentacled beings moving inside like underwater dancers. Then there was the UES Perseverance. Ji-won's ship looked like someone had welded together spare parts from a junkyard and painted it with rust. Thick metal plates covered sections of the hull where repairs had been made with whatever materials were available. Cables snaked across the outer surface like mechanical vines. Scorch marks from old battles created dark streaks across the grey metal. Even the name painted on the side looked faded and worn. "Captain, they're laughing at us again," Communications Officer Park Mina said from her station, her fingers dancing across holographic controls that flickered and sparked occasionally. She was young, maybe 25, with short black hair and eyes that burned with barely contained fury. The Vorthan captain just called us a floating garbage heap, in their language. The Zephyrians are making those clicking sounds they make when they find something amusing. Ji-won nodded slowly. He had expected this. Every time they docked at a neutral station, the same thing happened. Alien species would point at the human ship and whisper among themselves. Some would take pictures to show their friends back home. A few brave ones would even approach human crew members and ask if their ship was actually still capable of faster-than-light travel. "Sir, the Altarian delegation just sent us a message," Mina continued, her voice getting tighter. "They're offering to sell us parts for our antique museum piece at a discount." Lieutenant Commander Lee Hyun looked up from his tactical station, his jaw clenched so hard that Ji-won could see the muscles working in his cheek. Lee was built like a fighter, compact and strong, with scars on his hands from working on ship systems. "Let them laugh," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "They don't know what we're really carrying." Ji-won walked over to the main viewport and placed his hand against the transparent aluminum. Through it, he could see dozens of alien crews moving around their pristine ships. The Vorthans moved with mechanical precision, their forearms working independently as they performed maintenance tasks. The Zephyrians floated rather than walked, their translucent bodies shimmering as they communicated through color changes. Even the insectoid Cathari clicked and buzzed as they swarmed over their hive ships with perfect coordination. All of them looked at humans the same way, with pity, amusement, or barely disguised contempt. Earth's children were the newcomers to the galactic community, the species that had stumbled into space travel through brute force and stubbornness rather than elegant evolution. Human ships were crude, human technology was primitive, and human tactics were considered almost barbarically simple. "Captain," called out sensor specialist Yang Minji from the far corner of the bridge. She was hunched over a collection of monitors that seemed to be held together with tape and hope. "I'm picking up some unusual readings from the outer system, multiple large signatures moving in formation." Before Ji-won could respond, the station's emergency klaxons began to wail. The sound cut through the bridge like a knife, and every screen suddenly flashed red with warning symbols. The universal translation system crackled to life with a voice that sent chills down every human spine. "Attention all vessels," the cold mechanical voice announced. "This is Fleet Admiral Vextar of the Hegemony 4th Armada. By decree of the Hegemony Council, this system is now under our protection. All lesser species will immediately transfer tribute equal to 40% of their cargo value or face complete annihilation. You have 1 standard hour to comply." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of life support systems. Through the viewport, Ji-won could see alien crews scrambling across their ships. Some vessels were already powering up their engines, preparing to flee. Others seemed frozen, in terror. "Sir," Mina said, her voice barely above a whisper, Station Command is sending us priority orders. The message appeared on Ji-won's personal screen. As he read it, he felt something cold settle in his stomach. The Perseverance had been assigned as rear guard. While every other ship evacuated civilians and cargo, the human vessel would stay behind to buy time. On the communications channel, alien captains were already discussing the situation. The Vorthan commander expressed regret that the brave but foolish humans had been given such an impossible task. A Zephyrian captain suggested that perhaps the human ship could serve as a distraction for a few minutes before being destroyed. Chief Engineer Choi Dae-hyun approached from the engineering section, wiping grease from his hands with a dirty cloth. He was older than the others, grey threading through his black hair with eyes that had seen too many battles. "Sir," he whispered, glancing around to make sure no alien monitoring devices could pick up his words, "should we show them what we really are?" Ji-won looked at his crew, then back out at the alien ships that considered them nothing more than a minor inconvenience. A slow smile spread across his face, but it wasn't a happy expression. It was the smile of a predator that had been underestimated for far too long. "Not yet," he said quietly. "Let them think we're just buying time with our lives." The massive hegemony fleet emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made of metal and malice. Hundreds of warships materialized in perfect formation, their black hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Each vessel was easily 3 times the size of the Perseverance, bristling with weapon arrays that could crack planets in half. They moved with the slow, inevitable certainty of death itself. Chief Engineer Choi Dae-hyun stood in the lower maintenance corridor, running his calloused fingers along what every alien observer would see as corroded, patched hull plating. The metal felt warm under his touch, almost alive. To anyone watching, it looked like decades of poor repairs and jury-rigged fixes. Rust stains spread across the surface in seemingly random patterns. Welding marks scarred the metal, where emergency patches had been slapped over battle damage. But Dae-hyun knew better. He whispered a quiet command, and the rust began to shift and flow like liquid. The brown stains were actually millions of microscopic machines, adaptive nanotechnology that could alter the ship's appearance, density, and even its electromagnetic signature within seconds. What looked like damage was actually the most advanced camouflage system humanity had ever created. "Aegis Online," announced a voice that seemed to come from inside every crew member's head simultaneously. The ship's artificial intelligence spoke directly through neural implants that had been surgically placed at the base of each person's skull. The technology was still experimental, considered crude and dangerous by most alien species who preferred external interfaces. But humans had always been willing to take risks others wouldn't. Weapons Officer Han Subin felt the familiar tingle as Aegis connected to her consciousness. Her weapons console, which had looked like a collection of salvaged parts held together, with hope and duct tape, suddenly transformed. Holographic displays materialized in the air around her, showing targeting solutions, ammunition counts, and firing sequences. The outdated cannons mounted on the ship's exterior began to reconfigure themselves. What alien observers saw as primitive chemical projectile weapons were actually prototype kinetic rail systems. Each cannon could accelerate a projectile to nearly 10% of light speed using magnetic fields, so powerful they could tear apart molecular bonds. The ammunition itself was smart, able to adjust its course mid-flight and adapt its destructive properties based on the target. "Subin, how are our toys looking?" Dae-hyun asked through the neural link, his thoughts appearing as words in her mind. "All systems green," she replied, without speaking aloud. "The railguns are hungry, and we've got enough smart rounds to turn that entire fleet into space debris." Throughout the ship, other systems were coming online. The jury-rigged appearance that made alien engineers shake their heads in pity was actually a masterpiece of modular design. Armor plates could slide and reconfigure based on incoming threats. Shield generators hidden within what looked like broken equipment could create energy barriers strong enough to deflect antimatter warheads. Even the ship's engines, which appeared to be held together with spare parts, were actually variable geometry fusion drives capable of accelerations that would crush most organic life forms. Sensor specialist Yang Minji sat surrounded by screens that flickered and sparked, giving the impression of equipment on the verge of failure. In reality, she was controlling the most sophisticated sensor array in human space. "Stealth drones. Deployed," she reported, her fingers dancing across controls that responded to her thoughts as much as her touch. Beginning enemy formation analysis. Tiny machines no larger than insects had already launched from hidden ports across the Perseverance's hull. They looked like space debris to enemy sensors, but each one carried advanced scanning equipment. Within minutes, Minji had detailed information about every ship in the hegemony fleet. Their weapon configurations, shield frequencies, crew complements, and even the psychological profiles of their commanders. "Their flagship is the Dominion's Wrath," she announced. "Crew of 12,000, commanded by Fleet Admiral Caxmore. He's got a reputation for enjoying the destruction of inferior species. This isn't just military conquest for him, it's personal entertainment." The hegemony admiral's voice boomed across all communication frequencies, speaking in the universal trade language that all spacefaring species were required to learn. "Primitive humans, you have been selected for the honor of demonstrating our power to the other species in this system. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be quick. Resist, and we will make your final moments a lesson in the futility of defying the hegemony." Captain G1 stood on his bridge, hands clasped behind his back, looking remarkably calm for someone facing impossible odds. Through the neural network, his crew could feel his steady determination, his complete lack of fear. It was infectious, spreading through their shared consciousness like warmth on a cold day. The alien ships were positioning themselves for what they clearly expected to be a brief and entertaining target practice session. Hegemony doctrine was simple. Overwhelming firepower applied without mercy or hesitation. They had never encountered an enemy that required actual tactics. "Sir," Communications Officer Park Mina said aloud, "they're demanding an immediate response to their surrender." "Ultimatum." Jiwon smiled, and through the neural link, his crew felt the predatory satisfaction behind that expression. He activated the communication system and sent a message that would be recorded in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. "Come and take us." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of human history behind them. Every battle where outnumbered humans had stood their ground, every time humanity had been underestimated and had proven their enemies fatally wrong. Every moment when the universe had tried to crush the children of Earth, only to discover that humans became more dangerous when cornered. Through their shared neural network, the crew of the Perseverance felt each other's determination crystallize into something unbreakable. They had trained for this moment for years, running simulation after simulation, perfecting their coordination until they could think and act as a single entity while maintaining their individual strengths. The hegemony. Fleet began to advance, confident in their superiority. They had no idea they were about to face humanity's most advanced warship, crewed by people who had spent their entire lives preparing for this exact scenario. The aliens saw a rust bucket crewed by primitives. They were about to learn the difference between appearance and reality. The hegemony fleet unleashed hell itself upon the tiny human vessel. Thousands of energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and antimatter missiles streaked through space like angry red stars. The combined firepower was enough to turn a small moon into cosmic dust. Every alien captain expected to see the primitive human ship simply vanish in a brilliant flash of destruction. Instead, something impossible happened. The Perseverance moved like a living thing, twisting and spinning through the deadly storm of weapons fire with grace that defied physics. Energy beams that should have vaporized the hull passed through empty space where the ship had been microseconds before. Missiles exploded harmlessly against asteroids as their target danced away like smoke in the wind. Lieutenant Commander Lee Hyun sat at his tactical station, his hands moving so fast across the holographic controls that they seemed to blur. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he processed targeting data from 100 different enemy ships simultaneously. Through the neural link, he could feel the ship responding to his thoughts, its systems adapting to his commands before he even finished thinking them. "Initiating Pattern 7, he announced through the mental connection, his voice calm despite the chaos erupting around them. Pattern 7 was something the human military had developed after studying pack hunters on Earth. Wolves, sharks, even ancient human warriors had used similar tactics. Make yourself appear to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Confuse your enemy until they didn't know what was real and what was illusion. The ship's holographic projectors, hidden beneath what looked like damaged hull plating, suddenly came online. In an instant, there weren't one but dozen copies of the Perseverance scattered across the battlefield. Each hologram moved independently, weaving between enemy ships and asteroid fields with the same impossible grace as the original. Pilot Jung Seojin felt the ship's engines respond to his will like extensions of his own body. The fusion drives, disguised as jury-rigged repair jobs, suddenly revealed their true power. Acceleration forces that should have turned the crew into paste were absorbed by the ship's internal gravity systems. Seojin pushed the vessel through maneuvers that violated everything alien engineers thought they knew about physics. "Holy stars," breathed Weapons Officer Han Subin as she watched her targeting displays. "The hegemony ships are firing at ghosts." Through the main viewport, the crew could see enemy vessels turning their massive guns on holographic duplicates that flickered and danced just out of reach. Plasma beams passed harmlessly through false targets, while the real Perseverance slipped between their formations like a shadow. The ship's hull began to change shape as they moved. Adaptive armor plates slid and reconfigured, transforming the vessel from its familiar destroyer profile into something sleek and predatory. What had looked like random damage patterns were actually carefully designed points where the hull could fold and reshape itself. Within seconds, the human ship went from appearing like a battered freighter to resembling a mechanical shark cutting through dark water. "They're scattering their formation," Communications Officer Park Mina reported, her voice tight with excitement. She was monitoring enemy communications, listening as hegemony commanders shouted contradictory orders at their subordinates. "The Admiral is losing control of his fleet." Through the alien chatter, they could hear the growing panic. Hegemony doctrine was built around overwhelming firepower and perfect coordination. Their ships were designed to fight in tight formations, each vessel supporting the others with overlapping fields of fire. But now their carefully planned attack pattern was falling apart as captains broke ranks to chase what they thought were enemy vessels. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, sensor specialist Yang Minji called out. "3 heavy cruisers trying to bracket us." Jung Seojin grinned fiercely and pulled the ship into a spiraling dive that took them between 2 massive asteroids. The hegemony cruisers, each one the size of a city block, tried to follow, but their bulk worked against them. One scraped its hull against floating rock, sending sparks cascading through the void. "Pattern shift to 11, Lee Hyun commanded, and immediately the holographic decoys changed their behavior. Instead of running from the enemy ships, they began to act like predators stalking prey. False images of the Perseverance appeared to be targeting specific hegemony vessels, causing those ships to break formation and seek cover. Captain Jiwon stood in the center of his bridge, hands clasped behind his back, watching the chaos unfold with satisfaction. Through the neural network, his crew could feel his calm confidence, his absolute certainty that they would succeed. The aliens had made a fundamental mistake. They assumed that because human technology looked primitive, human tactics would be equally simple. "Sir, we've got them exactly where we want them," Lee Hyun reported, his voice carrying grim satisfaction. The hegemony fleet, which had started the battle in perfect formation, was now scattered across thousands of kilometers of space. Individual ships were chasing ghosts while the real threat moved among them like a wolf among sheep. The enemy admiral was screaming orders over the communication channels, trying to regain control of his forces. But it was too late. The careful discipline that made hegemony fleet so effective had been shattered by confusion and fear. Ship captains were acting independently, some fleeing what they thought were ambushes, others pursuing targets that didn't exist. "Then let's show them what humans do best," Jiwon replied, his voice carrying across the neural link to every member of his crew. "We adapt." The word hung in the shared consciousness like a battle cry. Every human knew their species' greatest strength wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their ability to face the impossible and find a way through it. When other species encountered problems, they applied standard solutions. When humans met obstacles, they invented new ways around them. The Perseverance suddenly changed course, no longer running from the scattered enemy ships, but moving toward them with predatory intent. The dance was about to become a hunt, and the hegemony fleet was about to learn why underestimating humanity was always a fatal mistake. The moment had come to drop the mask. Captain Jaiwan gave a single mental command through the neural network, and the Perseverance began its transformation. What happened next would be talked about in alien military academies for centuries. The ship's outer hull rippled like water disturbed by wind. Panels that had looked like crude patches and emergency repairs suddenly folded back with mechanical precision. The rusty, damaged appearance melted away as if it had never existed. Underneath, sleek black armor emerged, covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow in the starlight. Chief Engineer Choi Dae-hyun stood in the manufacturing bay, his consciousness connected to every system on the ship. Around him, automated machinery hummed to life with deadly purpose. The bay looked like any other industrial workspace, filled with fabrication units and raw materials, but these weren't meant for routine repairs. Custom ammunition online, he announced through the neural link, his thoughts carrying satisfaction and anticipation. Deploying guided asteroid packages. Robotic arms moved within human speed, assembling projectiles that had never appeared in any weapons manual. Each round was unique, crafted in real time based on the specific target it was meant for. Some were designed to punch through energy shields, others to exploit weaknesses in alien armor plating. A few were programmed to burrow into enemy ships and cause maximum internal damage, but Dae-hyun's masterpiece was something no alien military had ever conceived. The manufacturing bay began launching what looked like chunks of space rock toward the enemy fleet. To hegemony sensors, they appeared to be debris from the asteroid field, harmless fragments kicked up by the battle. In reality, each asteroid was a guided missile with its own navigation system and explosive payload. They drifted through space, on trajectories that looked completely natural, powered by tiny ion drives that produced no detectable signature. The enemy ships wouldn't realize what was happening until it was far too late. Weapons Officer Han Subin felt the ship's weapon systems integrate with her nervous system like she was growing new limbs. Every gun, every missile launcher, every defensive system responded to her thoughts faster than any manual control could achieve. The crew's individual expertise flowed together through their shared neural connection, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. "I can feel every enemy ship," she whispered in amazement. "Their weak points, their blind spots, even their emotional states. The hegemony crews are terrified but too proud to admit it." Through the neural network, the entire crew shared her expanded awareness. Lee Hyun's tactical knowledge merged with Minji's sensor data and Seojin's piloting instincts. They became a collective intelligence that could process information and make decisions at superhuman speed. "They're trying to regroup," Sensor Specialist Yang Minji warned, her consciousness spreading through the ship's sensor array like digital fingers. 3 heavy cruisers moving to flank us. The flagship is positioning for a direct assault." The hegemony admiral had finally managed to restore some order to his scattered fleet. The alien commander was bringing his most powerful vessels into a formation designed to trap the human ship between overlapping fields of fire. It was a classic maneuver, one that had worked against countless enemies across the galaxy. "Not today," pilot Jung Seojin growled, his hands dancing across controls that responded to his thoughts as much as his touch. He pushed the ship into a maneuver that should have torn any normal vessel apart. The Perseverance spun on 3 axes, simultaneously while accelerating in a direction that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The adaptive hull absorbed stresses that would have shattered conventional armor. More than that, it converted the kinetic energy from the extreme maneuver and fed it directly into the ship's weapon systems. The harder Seojin pushed the vessel, the more powerful their guns became. The Perseverance struck the first heavy cruiser like a mechanical shark attacking a whale. But instead of using traditional weapons, the human ship deployed something completely unexpected. The manufacturing bay launched a stream of what looked like industrial equipment toward the enemy vessel. Magnetic grapples, normally used for moving cargo, became guided projectiles that latched onto the cruiser's hull and began tearing away armor plating. Construction robots designed for building space stations swarmed over the alien ship and started dismantling its weapon systems from the outside. Even simple tools like plasma cutters became devastating weapons when deployed with human creativity direct. Hit on their primary reactor, Han Subin reported with grim satisfaction. They're losing power across all systems. The second cruiser tried to ram the human ship, its massive bulk accelerating toward the Perseverance like a mountain of metal and fury. But Seojin was ready for it. At the last possible second, he flipped the ship's orientation and fired the main engines directly at the approaching enemy vessel. The fusion exhaust, normally used for propulsion, became a directed energy weapon that superheated the cruiser's forward armor. The alien ship's hull began to buckle and melt under temperatures that rivaled the core of a star. Its momentum carried it past the Perseverance, but it was already dying, its crew struggling with fires and radiation leaks throughout their vessel. The third cruiser had learned from its companion's fate and was keeping its distance, trying to hit the human ship with long-range weapons. But Daehyun's guided asteroids had finally reached their target. What the aliens thought was harmless debris suddenly revealed itself as sophisticated missiles that struck from unexpected angles. Explosions bloomed along the cruiser's hull as the disguised weapons found weak points in its armor. The ship didn't die instantly, but it was crippled, its weapons offline, and its crew frantically trying to repair critical systems. "The flagship is moving," Minji announced. "Admiral Caxmore is bringing his personal dreadnought into the fight." Captain Ji-won smiled through the neural link, and his crew felt his anticipation like electricity in their minds. The enemy's most powerful ship was exactly what they had been waiting for. The Perseverance had been designed with one principle. Above all others, human creativity under pressure. When faced with impossible odds, humans didn't follow standard procedures. They improvised, adapted, and found ways to turn weakness into strength. The real battle was about to begin. Captain Kim Ji-won stood on his bridge like a conductor preparing to lead a deadly orchestra. Around him, chaos erupted as the hegemony fleet found itself fighting an enemy that shouldn't have existed. Ships that had dominated countless star systems were being picked apart by what they had dismissed as a primitive rust bucket. Through the neural network, Ji-won could feel his crew's minds working in perfect harmony. 50 individual consciousness merged into something greater, each person contributing their unique skills while sharing in the collective awareness. Lee Hyun's tactical brilliance flowed seamlessly into Minji's sensor data, while Seojin's piloting instincts merged with Subin's weapons expertise. The hegemony admiral was screaming orders from his massive flagship, a dreadnought the size of a small city. The alien commander couldn't understand what was happening to his supposedly invincible armada. His ships were designed to crush opposition through overwhelming firepower, but the human vessel was making them look like clumsy giants, swatting at a deadly wasp. "Broadcasting on all frequencies," Communications Officer Park Mina announced, her voice carrying grim satisfaction through the mental link. Her fingers danced across controls that opened channels across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. What happened next would become legend throughout the galaxy. The void around Kepler Station suddenly filled with sound that no alien species had ever heard in battle. Human voices, 50 strong, began to sing in defiant harmony. It wasn't a professional choir or a military march. It was something far more terrifying. The spontaneous war song of a species that had learned to find joy in the face of death. The crew sang songs their ancestors had carried into battle on ancient Earth. Voices rose and fell in melodies that spoke of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable human spirit. Some sang in Korean, others in languages from across their homeworld. But the emotion behind the words was universal. This was the sound of humans who refused to be intimidated by impossible odds. The psychological impact on the hegemony forces was devastating. Their species had conquered half the galaxy by inspiring terror in their enemies. They expected to face fear, desperation, maybe even noble defiance. But they had never encountered anything like this, humans who were actually enjoying the fight. Through their communications, alien captains could be heard asking their subordinates what the strange sounds meant. Some thought it was a form of primitive battle frenzy. Others wondered if humans were simply insane. None of them understood that they were hearing something that had echoed across battlefields for thousands of years, the sound of humanity at war. Flagship targeted, Weapons Officer Han Subin reported, her voice cutting through the singing like a knife. Her consciousness was merged with every weapon system on the ship, creating targeting solutions that no artificial intelligence could match. Firing sequence initiated. The Perseverance unleashed everything it had in one coordinated assault that would be studied in military academies for generations. Kinetic railgun rounds accelerated to near light speed, tore through the dreadnoughts. Energy shields like they were made of paper. Each projectile carried the energy of a small nuclear weapon, punching holes through armor plating that was supposed to be indestructible. But the kinetic rounds were just the beginning. Daehyun's guided asteroids, which had been drifting through, space disguised as debris, suddenly revealed their true nature. Dozens of camouflaged missiles struck the flagship from every angle, their explosions creating a chain reaction that rippled across the massive vessel's hull. The great ship, symbol of hegemony, dominance, and alien superiority, began to break apart. Secondary explosions bloomed along its length as ammunition stores and fuel tanks ignited. The bridge section, where Admiral Caxmore had been commanding his forces, simply vanished in a brilliant flash of vaporized metal. Multiple enemy contacts. Breaking off, sensor specialist Yang Minji reported. Her awareness spread throughout the sensor network. They're running. The remaining hegemony ships, seeing their flagship destroyed by what they had considered a primitive vessel, finally understood the truth. They weren't fighting some lucky primitives who had stumbled upon advanced technology. They were facing humans, a species that had spent millennia learning how to kill things bigger and stronger than themselves. Panic spread through the alien fleet like wildfire. Captains who had boasted about their invincibility were now desperately trying to escape the nightmare they had wandered into. Ships that had maintained perfect formation were scattering in all directions, their crews too terrified to think about military discipline. The Perseverance moved among the fleeing vessels like a shark among frightened fish. It didn't pursue every ship. That would have been wasteful. Instead, it selected specific targets demonstrating human precision and calculation. Each enemy vessel that was destroyed sent a message to the others. This is what happens when you underestimate humanity. As the last of the hegemony fleet vanished into hyperspace, Captain Jiwon gave a mental command through the neural network. The ship's systems began to power down, its advanced weapons retracting into hidden compartments. The adaptive hull started to reconfigure itself, rust-colored nanotechnology spreading across the surface like age and neglect. Within minutes, the Perseverance once again looked like nothing more than an old patched-together vessel limping back toward Kepler Station. The transformation was so complete that anyone who hadn't witnessed the battle would assume it was just another obsolete human ship held together with spare parts and stubbornness. Think they learned their lesson? Chief Engineer Choi Dae-hyun asked, wiping imaginary grease from his hands as he resumed his role as the keeper of a supposedly failing ship. Captain Ji-won looked out at the debris field that had once been the mighty Hegemony 4th Armada. Alien rescue pods were scattered throughout the wreckage, their occupants no doubt telling tales that would seem impossible to anyone who hadn't lived through them. They learned not to underestimate the ship, he replied with a grim smile. Now, they need to learn not to underestimate humanity. Through the neural network, his crew felt the weight of that statement. The galaxy had just received its first real lesson in human warfare. Every species that heard this story would have to reconsider their assumptions about Earth's children. The age of dismissing humans as primitive newcomers was over. The Perseverance docked at Kepler Station like any other freighter returning from a routine patrol. But across the galaxy, emergency councils were being called, intelligence reports were being rewritten, and military strategies were being completely rethought. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. The end.